Planet Reddit. Today's story is...
My sister tried to sabotage my boring marriage, but 3 days before her luxurious wedding, I discovered the scandalous secret she was hiding from her millionaire fiancé. I have always firmly believed in telling the truth, even if it is painful. There is nothing I detest more than lies. Often, big problems can be avoided simply by being honest. I have repeated this to my family countless times, but it seems that my words fall on deaf ears. Now they have brought out the worst in me. Should I apologize? I don't think so. However, they all insist that I should have handled the situation with more tact. I asked them what would have been better to do, but no one gave me a specific answer. Instead of telling them to get lost for not being helpful, I decided to seek an outside opinion. You can be as direct as you need to be with me. Tell me what I could have done better in this situation, and I promise not to get upset. In fact, it will help me grow as a person. Enough with the introductions. Here's what you need to know. Last night, I got into a terrible public argument with my parents over dessert. But it wasn't just about dessert. It was about how they supported my sister's lack of responsibility. She was the one who ordered the wrong dessert and then took it out on the waitress. Everyone at the table heard her ask for strawberry flavor, but when the waitress brought it to her, she exploded and demanded that they give her vanilla. When the waitress kindly tried to remind her that she had asked for strawberry, my sister called the manager. I offered her my vanilla dessert, but pointed out that she had made a mistake. She refused to acknowledge it and continued to make a fuss. I should mention that we were at a table with 16 relatives. Everyone seemed embarrassed or pretended not to see what was happening. When the manager arrived, my sister demanded that the waitress be fired, and I couldn't hold back any longer. I told her that she had already ruined the dinner for everyone. All night long, she had talked about nothing but her wedding, and she didn't allow anyone to change the subject. It was then that she had the audacity to break down in tears, saying that I was being cruel. According to her, all she wanted was a day when she would not be overshadowed by me. Now I understand everything. That's why she lied about the lost invitation, right? That's why she kept waiting for my invitation to her wedding, while she continued to make excuses. I told her that lying didn't suit her. My mother gave me a warning look and shook her head, silently indicating that I should be quiet. Meanwhile, my father reprimanded me with disappointment, which only made me laugh and get even more angry with her. I told her that I needed to hear the truth. Not only was she behaving like an immature person, but she was also a liar who was about to get an innocent employee fired for her own mistake. Then I told the manager that it was no longer necessary for him to stay, because my sister had made a mistake. My sister was speechless, as were my parents. She seemed to want to say something, but instead she got up and left, crying. After that, everyone remained silent. I knew that all eyes were on me, but I didn't care. I said what many were thinking. She was behaving badly without justification. My mother broke the silence and told me to go and apologize to my sister because I had crossed the line. I replied that I wouldn't apologize in a million years and continued eating my dessert. Seeing that I had no intention of giving in, my father ordered me to leave. He said there was no place for my negativity when we were celebrating my sister's new house. At that moment, my brother-in-law returned from having taken a call when it all happened. He asked where my sister was, and my mother sarcastically told him to ask me. I laughed and told him she was in the bathroom crying because she is a spoiled person who thinks the world revolves around her. I didn't even give him time to respond. I left money to pay for my meal and looked for the waitress who had served us. I gave her a generous tip for putting up with my family and left. I couldn't take it anymore. My patience had reached its limit. I wasn't surprised when my sister later sent me a message informing me that I was no longer invited to the wedding. How ironic, considering that I was pretty sure I had never been invited in the first place. It all started when she casually forgot to send me an invitation months ago. At first, I didn't think I would need a formal one, being her sister. For my wedding, I simply included my immediate family on the list, and they came without an invitation. I only realized there was a problem when I found my mother's invitation. So I asked her, and she replied with feigned surprise, "Didn't you get yours?" She then explained that, as my sister's wedding was going to be an exclusive event, she needed an invitation to avoid confusion. She said she might have forgotten to send it. This was 2 months ago, and I still don't have an invitation. I started to worry that I wouldn't be allowed into the wedding. I confronted my sister about it, and she assured me it had been a mistake. She explained that she had printed the other invitations in bulk, so she would have to place a special order for mine. I started to get suspicious when there was no update. It occurred to me that maybe my sister didn't want me to attend and was using this as an excuse to keep me away. My suspicion grew when she finally sent me an invitation without the option of bringing a guest. I asked her where the invitation for my husband was, and she said she had made a mistake, so I had to return the invitation. Her wedding is next week, and I need that invitation if I want to attend. But it seems like my sister just doesn't want me to participate, and that bothers me deeply. I confronted her and asked if I had done something to offend her, and she just replied that I was being dramatic and that I was stressing her out. So I consulted with my mother, and she said I was overreacting. The problem is that I can feel that something is not right, and I haven't been able to shake that feeling. What happened today was the perfect opportunity for my sister to exclude me from her wedding. I shouldn't have to worry so much about my own sister's invitation. She's a big liar, as she showed today, but our parents always defend her. Now I'm getting criticism from them, especially from my mother. Also, my mother said something very revealing a moment ago. She said, "This is why your sister was hesitating about inviting you to the wedding. You always steal the show from her." I asked her what she meant by that. She explained that it was because I got married first, even though I am 2 years younger than my sister. It's true that I got married a few months ago, but it was because I wanted a small wedding. Why is it a problem that I got married first, even though I am younger? Mom said I didn't get my sister's hints, that she wanted to get married first, and that she still feels a lot of pressure to have a spectacular wedding because she thinks she's competing with me. One thing about my mother is that she talks without thinking, and now she has confirmed my suspicions. I think I need to have a heart-to-heart with my sister. I promise to be kinder this time. I admit that last time my anger took over. Update 1. Talk about making things worse. The dispute between my sister and I has intensified twofold in the last few days. I can't believe I tried to be the mature person only for her to respond to me with contempt, figuratively speaking. She called me an envious witch, and now I'm about to show her who the envious one really is. It has made me so angry that now I have no intention of letting her enjoy a peaceful wedding. I know this is a radical change from what I said in my previous post, but before I said such nonsense, I really tried to have a civilized conversation with her. I really wanted to make things right and understand if she genuinely felt bad that I got married first. I was willing to listen to her and even apologize for my behavior at the restaurant. But instead of taking a moment to be honest with me, she looked at me with contempt and asked why in the world she would be jealous of me. Then, arrogantly, she claimed that her future husband was much more attractive and wealthy than mine, that their wedding would be a prestigious event because her fiancé had political connections in the city, and that her life was absolutely perfect. So she didn't mind that I had married first? How convenient. It's funny that she should say that because, although my mother talks too much, she is not a liar. She always tells the truth, and if she had told me that my sister was jealous, then it was true. And I could see it for myself. Observing her body language, I noticed that she avoided looking me in the eye, and that her tone of voice was higher than normal, clear signs that my sister was not being honest with herself. So I asked her if she was trying to convince me or herself. After all, if her fiancé was so wonderful, had she forgotten that she once confessed to me that there had been no spark when they first started dating? She rolled her eyes and told me that, with time, the spark appeared. So I asked her if it was the same spark she had with Romeo, her ex-boyfriend, fictitious name, and at that moment she could barely hold my gaze. When Romeo betrayed her after years of relationship, she was completely devastated and swore that she would not date anyone again for a long time. And then, suddenly, her current fiancé appeared, and magically, from one day to the next, she was eager to get married. I know her well, and I know that she can't stand feeling like a failure. Maybe he was just a way to get over her breakup, even if she now insisted he was the love of her life. However, the way her expression changed when I mentioned Romeo made me think that maybe this wedding wasn't for love, but for revenge. She became defensive and told me to stay out of her love life, that it wasn't her fault that I was so boring. According to her, I had never really lived. The only thing I was good at was getting excellent grades and dating the same man since my senior year of high school. Clearly, she couldn't understand the idea that a person could fall in love more than once. And then, with a mocking smile, she asked me what I knew about romance when my own marriage was boring. That's when she crossed the line. To mess with my marriage was already too much. My husband and I are perfectly happy with our life, and we enjoy the simple things. But she just laughed and told me that, in the family, we were all called the old marriage. Because, according to her, the passion in my relationship had long since died out. I couldn't take it anymore. I left her house furious. She wants to call me boring? Well, I'll show her what boring is. If she wants to talk about my marriage behind my back, then maybe the whole family needs to know what she really thinks about them. I was so angry that I sent screenshots of some of our private conversations to everyone. If this ends badly for her, she deserves it for being a liar, for being a hypocrite, and for attacking me like that. Now she'll get to know the worst version of me. She'd better be prepared, because the storm is just beginning. Update 2. Nothing is as chaotic as the drama of a wedding. I think I've just started a family conflict of epic proportions. First, exposing my sister in the restaurant, and then leaking those messages, any hope of reconciliation with her is completely lost. That's what I call burning bridges. But it's a well-burned bridge. What's more, my parents are furious with me, and of course, they've taken her side. But she provoked me. What was I supposed to do? She's been impossible with me. First, she excluded me from the wedding, and then she lied to me about it. Then she had the audacity to attack my marriage. Well, these are the consequences of her own actions. And to begin with, I didn't even know this, but apparently, after my sister came back from the bathroom that night at dinner, she took it out on everyone. She yelled at the family for not defending her against me and called them cowards. Some relatives were so offended by her attitude that they canceled their attendance, calling her the most unpleasant person of the century. While all this was going on, I was facing an even bigger crisis because of what I had done. Maybe I shouldn't have sent those messages to her in-laws, but what other option did she leave me? She'd been bad-mouthing them to me for months, even though I wasn't even invited to the wedding. Isn't that strange? Over the last month, almost every other day she would complain bitterly about her in-laws, calling them arrogant, impossible to please, and a nightmare to deal with. She even went so far as to say that she wished she could move to another city with her husband just to get away from her meddling in-laws. The irony is that she criticized them for being too rich and for how socially awkward some of them were. I remember that when she made that comment, I even asked her if she wasn't exaggerating, since they were, after all, her in-laws. I tried to convince her to give them a chance and to make an effort to get along with them, but she told me she wasn't looking for advice, she just wanted to let off some steam. Well, I took those messages and sent them to the few in-laws I had added on social media. And then I waited for the inevitable chaos. It wasn't long before my sister started bombarding my phone, demanding to know what I had done. She told me that I had probably ruined her wedding because I am selfish, and that she hated me. Then, in a fit of rage, she told me that she wished I had a miserable marriage with my boring husband, who only knows how to talk about science, and that we had a child who was just as boring. To top it all off, she added that she hoped the children would inherit my appearance, because my husband's only strength is his intelligence. Hadn't she learned anything about talking badly about people? When she said that, I replied that she deserved everything that was happening to her and that I hoped her fiancé would leave her. He deserves someone who really loves him, because she could fool everyone else, but not me. She doesn't love him, she loves his money and what he can do for her. I had kept this feeling to myself for so long, trying to be a supportive sister. But now it has been released. And let me tell you, it feels so good to put my sister in her place. For her, on the other hand, it didn't feel good at all. Soon after, my mother called me in a panic. She told me that guests were canceling, and that all the money spent on my sister's wedding might end up being a waste. Our parents paid for both weddings. They had a big budget for mine, but I used most of the money to make the down payment on our house. For my sister's wedding, however, they went over the top. But now, all that might have been for nothing. Half of the guest list was on her fiancé's side, and it turns out she had horrible things to say about that half, so naturally they no longer wanted to attend the wedding. I never would have imagined that this would end with such a result. I thought she would have a small problem, but losing almost half of her guests, that's really shocking. And the wedding itself? Surprisingly, it's still on. Despite everything that has happened and the pressure from his family, her fiancé did not cancel the wedding. Instead, he posted a message on social media asking for respect for their privacy and saying that if anyone didn't have anything nice to say, they should just keep quiet. There's no doubt that he loves her, but I don't think she loves him. How could she, when she finds fault with every single person in his family? Look, my in-laws aren't perfect, but I've never spent so much time criticizing their flaws. This is clearly immature behavior, and honestly, I'm so glad I put up with all their unbearable outbursts, because in the end, they became an incredibly powerful weapon. Update 3. Well, as I write this, I'm in the hospital. The last 24 hours have been like something out of a movie. I knew I was right about my sister. I saw the signs, but I didn't analyze them enough. If I had been more determined to dig deeper, I would have uncovered this mess before it got completely out of control. But how did I end up in the hospital? And what happened to my sister's wedding? To begin with, my sister's wedding never even started. There were just a few posts from the venue that morning on my mom's social media, but when it was time for the ceremony to begin, my mother called me frantically, asking if I had spoken to my sister. Apparently, my sister had disappeared without a trace and had not shown up at her own wedding. Her bridesmaids had been looking for her all morning, but they only alerted my parents a few minutes before the ceremony was due to start. Worst of all, her car was not at the hotel where she had slept. I told my mother that I hadn't spoken to her in days, so I was the last person she should ask. But she begged me to try to think of anywhere my sister might have gone. She was completely beside herself, so reluctantly I agreed to go to the wedding venue. When I arrived, half the guests were already there, and panic was taking hold. We called every person we could think of, but got no response until suddenly my mother received a call from the hospital. My sister had been admitted the night before. She needed urgent surgery and required her next of kin to be present. This is where things got even stranger. She hadn't put her fiancé as her emergency contact, instead of her parents. Why? That was strange enough, but at the time, we didn't have time to analyze it. We rushed to the hospital, and when we arrived, Mom had to sign a bunch of documents before the emergency surgery could begin. A couple of hours later, the doctor took my mother and my sister's fiancé aside to talk to them. When they came back, they had devastated faces, but they didn't want to tell anyone what was going on. I got tired of trying to get the truth out of my mom and was about to leave when my sister's ex-boyfriend, Romeo, walked into the hospital. He came in furious, straight towards my sister's fiancé, and punched him. Between punches, he shouted that if anything happened to my sister, it would be his fault. He accused him of being responsible for having forced her to go ahead with the termination. We managed to separate them and demanded to know what he was talking about. We were all completely confused, and then she revealed the biggest surprise of all. My sister had been having an affair with her ex, and she got pregnant. There was a strong possibility that the baby was not her fiancé's, and if it wasn't, it would be evident when it was born. To avoid ruining her marriage before it had even begun, she told her ex that she would terminate the pregnancy. It was at that moment that my sister's fiancé interrupted to correct the story. According to what the doctors had told him, my sister had suffered a miscarriage due to complications and needed surgery immediately because her entire body was being affected. The doctors were also considering preventing her from conceiving in the future because the damage to her body was severe. But Romeo didn't believe a word of it. He insisted it wasn't a miscarriage, but a failed attempt to make sure the pregnancy ended. He said she had told him her plans at the beginning of the week, but he was out of town. By the time he returned, it was too late. I don't even know what to think at the moment. My sister was cheating on her fiancé, she got pregnant, and now she's in the hospital because of it. Her wedding didn't even happen, and now her 2 men are fighting over her in a hospital. At least I know I had nothing to do with this. Update 4. Part of me feels sorry for my sister, but another part believes that she brought it on herself. She was the one who cheated on her fiancé, got pregnant, and then tried, unsuccessfully, to get rid of the problem. Now, everyone knows what she did because her ex stormed into the hospital and exposed everything. What happened next was obvious. Her fiancé called off the wedding because she had betrayed him without compunction. And that was after he was still willing to marry her, despite all the horrible things she said about his family. But anyway, she lost a good man, just like that, out of the blue. And honestly, I think it was for the best. When she woke up in the hospital, she didn't want to see me because she was still angry with me for leaking her messages. She said I had made her life even more miserable when she was already dealing with what happened with the baby. She told me I could never trust her, because if she had ever trusted me with her secret, she would have revealed it anyway. Well, that's her opinion, and there's nothing I can do to change it. When I left the hospital, I never visited her again. I later found out that Romeo went back to her, and they moved in together. I hardly saw her around town, and when I did, she wouldn't even look at me or say a word. It wasn't long before I heard that she had been admitted to a women's shelter because she was experiencing violence in her relationship. I wonder if her miscarriage was also because of Romeo. I was angrier at my parents than anyone else. They never supported me when my sister excluded me from the wedding, but as soon as she disappeared, they expected me to help. And then they had the nerve to ask me to help them get the money back from the wedding venue, because they had spent a fortune on a wedding that never happened. Why would I want to help them after how they treated me? I told them they were on their own and that I wanted nothing to do with their mess. But unfortunately, they kept insisting, and that made me furious. So I decided to show them what my anger can really do. You see, my job means I get to know most of the business owners in town, especially the restaurant owners, and I happen to be very good friends with the owners of my family's favorite places. They owed me a couple of favors, and when I told them the situation, they were more than willing to ban my parents from entering. I did it out of pure meanness. A few days later, my mother was furious because she was turned away from 2 restaurants in a row. She called me, demanding to know what was going on, and I made it clear to her that it was me. I told her that I frequent those places and that the last thing I want is to run into them. She became enraged, yelling at me to stop being childish. He asked me, how can you take over restaurants because of a little family drama? I laughed and said, why don't you ask your daughter to get you a table? Oh wait, you can't, because she never married the man with so many connections. I don't feel bad about my parents, not at all. Nor about my sister. She cheated on her fiancé, who seemed like he could be a good man for her, and all to get back with her ex. The same ex who was unfaithful to her, and the same ex who abused her. When I put all this into perspective, I love having a peaceful marriage with a predictable husband. For me, there is nothing better than stability. I don't want to go through an experience like my sister's in the hospital. If that's her idea of fun, I'd rather eat something bitter. Update 5. Everyone has asked me for an update on my life, my family, and everything related to my story. My life is still very quiet. To illustrate this, I will say that 2 weekends ago, we went on a romantic getaway where we visited museums. We also went for walks on the beach and had romantic dinners, but for my sister, that would be worse than an unpleasant experience. However, for us, it's what we like, so it's been wonderful. And most importantly, there was no ex assaulting my husband because of a pregnancy. As for my sister, I don't know. It's been over a year since she decided to leave the city and start over somewhere else. I also know she did it because of Romeo, because, despite the restraining order, he broke it a couple of times. We still don't talk to each other, and that's what hurts the most. I say this because if she gets married again, she probably won't invite me, and I don't know if I'll be lucky enough to be in the front row when it all blows up like last time. I'd hate to miss the event, and since my sister says I have a boring life, she should invite me to make it more interesting. But, joking aside, I'm fine with us not talking to each other. The same goes for my parents, who every time they want to go to a restaurant have to leave the city. However, this has been positive for the rest of the family, so they tell me. Because, after the last family dinner, nobody wants to go out to dinner with them, and this is the best excuse. I wasn't lying when I said that everyone had an uncomfortable evening with my sister and my parents.